Hey, everybody. Welcome. We're so glad you're here for our usual Friday get together. What's new and coming up with lipedema? I'm Leslyn Keith. I'm president of the board of directors and director of research for the Lipedema Project. And I'm here with my friends and colleagues. Gail, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gail Straker. I'm the community manager here at Lipedema Simplified, and it feels good to be back. That's all I
Yeah,
can say.
yeah.
I
Even
love
though
it.
you're in your car, you're back.
I'm in my car, but I'm not driving at this time. I'm sitting in a
Yes,
parking lot, so
not
I'm
driving.
good.
Not driving. Very important. And Siobhan, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Siobhan. I'm the research specialist with the Lipedema Project. I read a bunch of stuff and then I talk about it, sometimes other things, but that's the main part.
And that's Siobhan in a nutshell. But so many other things. So we have a couple of announcements, and then as usual, Siobhan has a great topic of discussion that I think will be of interest to people that are listening to us or watching this on replay. But as we're going, please post where you are in the world, anything you want to make a comment on. Gail always loves it if you send us some love. so say where you are in the world and anything you want to comment on. And we always love to see who's listening and where you are. We do get a lot of really global audience tuning in, so that's always fun. But just to let you know some things that are coming up. First, I'm going to be talking at a free webinar that's happening on September 6th at 5 p.m. Eastern. And my topic is lipedema, mother of our species. We're going to be talking about genetics. We're going to talk about hormones and all the things that we think we know and the things that we still need to figure out. But we know that these seem to have evolved to be part of lipedema, and there probably was a reason why. We're going to talk about that and how it impacts modern day lipedema. So look forward to hopefully seeing you there. There'll be a link down below to register and to get more information about it. And then another thing that we have coming up starting on September 17th, Gail, can you talk about what Carrie Reedy is going to be doing?
Sure. So Carrie Reedy is a nutritionist. She works closely with us here at Lipedema Simplified, and she does a small group coaching. She limits her class size to 6. I believe. I think sometimes a 7th one gets to sneak in. But she's going to talk about how nutrition is a vital component to our management of lipedema and lymphedema. And so be aware, we had a webinar last night for her. There's another webinar coming up next Friday on the live. So be looking for your email or wherever you're coming from here right now and watching us, you can watch the webinar. However, if you are already all excited and you want to get involved with the small group coaching, I'm going to post that in the comments right now, so you can go ahead and register, because like I said, she has to limit her class to 6. I think she's had 7 once, but other than that, I mean, she'll run another course. It's a 3-week course that she runs. She meets twice a week. You end up with it's like 6 hours of really in-depth, it's a very intimate group, lots of support from your cohort, and so she's going to be doing that. So be watching your emails for her next webinar, which is next Friday at 6. However, if you just want to go in and take a look and see what it's all about before you go to her webinar, check out the link I just put in the comments.
Fantastic. And that was 6 p.m. Eastern for that free webinar on Friday, next Friday. I think it's going to be September 8th. So
Yes.
Thank you, Gail. It's a great opportunity. I've heard a lot of good things about her small group coaching. And then the last event we have coming up is going to be our heart-to-heart virtual event. Siobhan, could you say a few words about that coming up?
Yeah, so the October event is always the event where we tend to focus on the holistic approach overall. So not just nutrition, not just physical components of management like compression and MLD, but also other things like spiritual connection. And that may not be religion, it may just be how you fit into the world, how you feel about yourself and what's around you. The like meditative aspects, the deep breathing aspects, which actually fits in like multiple categories. So we end up talking about all of that stuff together, and it's a really good time to either get introduced to those concepts if you're new, or to revisit them. Like every time I go to one of these events, I always find at least one thing I can take away and be like, okay, that's going to be the next thing I'm going to focus on. And the other cool thing about it is it's not just information. It's also getting to interact with other people with lipedema and hear about their experiences and share your own experiences. And then also, like, as the talks are going on, the chat is always going on, and then we have breakout rooms after, so you actually get time to digest and talk about it with other people. And like, I didn't get what they meant about like this thing. Well, you can discuss that and have it clarified right away, or bring it to the Q&A, stuff like that. So hopefully that was clear at all. But basically, it's a really, really excellent event, not just for learning things and refocusing, but also connecting with other people in the community. The ones we've had more recently have been super, super special because it's had that focus on connection. And community and building up those relationships for people.
And it really is a global connection, because we do get people from around the world. And for some people, the hours of the event are going to be in the middle of their night. So they may not be on it live and be watching replays and stuff like that. But we do have people that you will see people from Western Europe, from Australia, and New Zealand, Canada, all over. We've had people from South Africa. So it is really a global event. I think it's going to be pretty exciting. And just to say hi, to thank you for posting who you are and where you are. We have Becky from Asheville, North Carolina, and Leslie from Georgia, and Jody from Wisconsin, Robin from Marlborough, Massachusetts, and Joanne from St. Louis, Kathy May from Montana. Thank you guys for posting. Patty from Port Richey, Florida, and Julie, as usual, my neighbor from Camarillo, California. And Julie, I'm on my way to Camarillo to go juggling at Pitts. I think it's Pitts Ranch Park. And we're going to be there at 5 o'clock tonight if you want to stop by. And Rita from Malta, thank you for joining us. So we, as usual, have a nice little topic of discussion today. It's kind of a new thing that we've been talking about for lipedema. And as always, Siobhan has the rundown on it. She's going to kind of give us some basics about this new thing we're exploring. Siobhan, you want to talk about ketones?
Yeah, so just to kind of give a general recap, and I'll also give some of my prior history, because my views on this have changed over time. So what we're going to be talking about is exogenous ketones, and sometimes it can be controversial because it's like, why would you want to supplement with exogenous ketones if you can just make your own? And it's like,
I have a question.
Yes.
That's a big word. I mean, I don't know what ketones are. I think I know what ketones are. I think I'm making ketones. But what are these things exogenous? What does that mean, exogenous?
Yeah, so ketones are essentially a type of fuel that we can make, our livers make it when we burn fat for fuel. One of the products of that is ketones. And the ketones can go up to the brain to help supply energy. They can go to pretty much all tissues to help. They also have very powerful signaling properties. I was going to say something, but it's kind of controversial. You could almost call them a hormone, but I don't think that's been established. But kind of similarly, because they can have so many different effects. And then in terms of exogenous, there's exogenous and then there's endogenous. So endogenous is when it comes from inside. So the endo is inside. So that's what you make by yourself. And then exogenous would be if you consume something to help you produce ketones, or essentially you're ingesting a form of ketones so that you can have an increased amount in your body. And it is correct, you can make your own. And for a lot of people, that's perfectly fine. That's all they need. But and that's kind of where I was at in the beginning of my journey. Like when I first started keto, I was like, who needs exogenous ketones? Whatever. Like you can just make your own. It's way cheaper, blah, blah, blah. But at this point, I think there are certain circumstances where they can actually be helpful. One important aspect of this, I think, is that the levels of ketones in your brain reflect the levels in your bloodstream. So if you ingest a ketone salt or a ketone ester, you can boost the amount of ketones in your brain, which may be helpful for if you have like a glass of wine and you're having like the ketogenic post-alcohol hypoglycemia the next morning, because alcohol can do that. Then I found it useful in that case to take exogenous ketones and kind of help with that. In terms of lipedema, what we've been hearing about from people is that for some people, they find it helpful in terms of if they're having a spike in brain fog, in fatigue, some of those mental effects from the big pressure changes like flight travel or storms rolling through, anything like that. Sometimes exogenous ketones can help. And then also I've heard from various people that it can also sometimes help with the lipedema related pain. Particularly it seems like if it's from a swelling flare. And people sometimes ask like, what do you mean a flare? A flare is basically like you can have symptoms kind of like around this level and then all of a sudden it goes up. Like something caused a big spike in symptoms. So whenever I say flare, that's what I mean, like a big spike in symptoms. And the other aspect that I find really interesting is I also know some people who they were starting a ketogenic diet or intending to, but they wanted some of those properties from ketones while their body was still adapting. So it could potentially take like 6 weeks to actually keto adapt. And for some people, they find that it takes up to 2 weeks for the pain relief effect to kick in. And some people did say that they took exogenous ketones like as a bootstrap until their body could produce their own, and then they didn't bother anymore. So that's what I find kind of interesting about it is I think ketones are really cool. And they do have other applications. Like I know some people with epilepsy who take them before big bouts of exercise because exercise can drive ketones down. I know some people who use it for combating cravings, like food cravings, they'll take exogenous ketones. Other people where they're using a ketogenic diet for mental health benefits. I'm actually one of these people. And if they have something like they accidentally ate something that caused a negative health impact, then they can take exogenous ketones, and sometimes that can act like a little bit of a rescue.
Yes.
So I'm getting like more and more bullish on ketones as I go. However, I will clarify here, not everybody needs them. They are super expensive. I mean, it's something that they have to create in a lab and like isolate down and all this stuff. But I think in certain circumstances, it is useful to know that it can be an option. And I do want to see it further explored and then people reporting back, because it could be very possible that in some situations it's helpful, in other situations it's not helpful. Or for some situations of lipedema-related pain, it's helpful, and in others, it's not. And we would want to know that so that new people coming in, we can say, oh, from what you're describing, this may be helpful. Or, no, I wouldn't really bother. I would just do this other stuff instead.
Siobhan, along those lines, I would like to ask anybody who's watching this if they could email us if they've experimented with exogenous ketones. If you could email us and let us know, how did it work out for you? What did you notice, good or bad? Leslyn at lipedemaproject.org. We would love to hear from you. We're kind of gathering information about exogenous ketones and its effect on symptoms of lipedema. And so far, we've been thinking about pain, fatigue, and brain fog, but maybe you've noticed something else. Maybe it had an effect on your other symptoms. So email me and let me know. And I know that, Gail, you're about to make a point. Go ahead.
That was what I was going to ask. Are all exogenous ketones created equal? I would think not.
Yeah, so there are.
If I'm getting a quality exogenous ketone.
Yeah, there are different kinds, and I find it kind of interesting because there's like 4 different types you'll usually come across, and then I'll throw in an extra because I'll count it anyway. So there's salts, there's ketone salts, and basically that means, and I'll include esters in here as well. So it's basically a ketone bound with something else. And if you think about like the different types of magnesium you can take, you can think about it that way, like magnesium oxide, magnesium citrate. Like usually you have magnesium and then it's bound to something else. So similar thing with that. And with that, what's happening is you're not actually directly consuming ketones. It's like that bound up ketones, and then it has to go to your liver, and then your liver will kind of break those apart, and then you get the ketones as a result. There's also, I think it's pronounced like ketone butanediol. It's basically with an alcohol, not the kind that gets you drunk, but chemical alcohol. Similar thing. And then with the ketone salts and esters, they usually don't taste very good. So that is a downside. People will joke about like the rocket fuel kind of taste. There are some.
And I always wonder, when did you last try rocket fuel? So how do you know?
Yeah, so the alcohol one, the butanediol or whatever, can taste kind of alcohol-y, as you would expect. The others are just kind of like a kind of taste. And then there's also bioidentical ketones that are now on the market. They tend to be more expensive, so that's a downside for them. But the cool thing is, in my experience and from what I've heard from the company themselves, it tends to work very quickly. So 5 to 10 minutes, you'll start feeling it. If you feel anything, sometimes you don't. And with that, you actually are drinking the ketones themselves. So it'll go through your gut. It doesn't need to go through the liver to process it, which may be relevant for some people. I don't know. And then the additional one that I mentioned is MCT oil or coconut oil. So that is actually another way to get ketones. You're not actually ingesting ketones or bound ketones or anything like that. What happens is that some of the fats in the MCT and coconut oil will be converted to ketones when you process them, even if you're not on a ketogenic diet. So you'll sometimes see that in reference to things like Alzheimer's. They're not prepared to go on a ketogenic diet, so they're just supplementing with coconut oil or MCT oil to get ketones up to some level so that they can transition them onto a ketogenic diet easier.
Right.
Yeah, so there's a broad array. And from my experience, because whenever I'm at conferences, I'll usually try the exogenous ketones just to see, like, is this one I might be interested in buying? Like, what is the flavor like? And there's a couple of brands that I found I get a good effect from, and they don't bother me. There are other brands where I have tried it and it's caused negative mental effects in terms of anxiety, some other issues as well. And I don't know why that is. It might have been a higher dose. It might have been the flavorings that they added to it, where those flavorings come from. I just didn't react to it very well. So that is one thing, is I don't think they're all the same, but it might be individual in terms of reactions.
Right.
Because at the conference, it's not like everybody was like, oh, I had a bad effect from that. It was mainly like me and maybe one other person was like, oh, yeah, I didn't like that one. So I think it is trial and error to some extent. And Leslie in the chat asked, is all coconut oil considered MCT oil? No. So coconut oil is just the fat from a coconut that's been refined from everything else. And then within coconut oil, there are medium chain triglycerides. So it's talking about the length of the fatty acid. And that is the MCT. So the MCT stands for medium chain triglyceride. And that one is the one that's actually processed by the liver into juice.
And it also, that is the kind of fat, or medium chain triglycerides, are the kind of fat that will bypass your gut lymphatics.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have an issue with, you think you might have an issue with your central lymphatics or your gut lymphatics, coconut oil and MCT bypasses the gut lymphatics. For the MCT especially, coconut oil has a variety of fats in it, but specifically MCT bypasses the gut lymphatics and goes straight to the liver through the portal vein. So, but also I've heard that both coconut oil and MCT oil can lead to some diarrhea.
Mm-hmm. And
so that amounts.
Yeah, that might be because in the gut, there's probably, I mean, I don't know that I've seen a study on this, but there's probably a rate limit on how quickly you can absorb things. And so if you have a liquid fat, and people have commented on this in terms of like liquid tallow, liquid butter, basically any liquid fat. If you have too much of it at once, it goes through too quickly and you can't absorb it. That's the leading idea I have for why that happens.
Yes.
But yes, definitely coconut oil, MCT oil, you might have the same issue.
And when I start up on MCT oils, and it's funny because I don't take it all the time. I just have never been. Maybe I should do an experiment and do it steadily for a certain length of time. But what I usually do is I usually start with 1/4 teaspoon.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't sound like very much. It isn't very much, but that's what I start, because if I go to a 1/2 teaspoon, I'm taking a quick sprint I don't sprint, but I sprinted, as Julie Rosa would say, I'm sprinting in my mind, but yes. I go as fast as I can, because I'm not going to make it to the bathroom in time. But 1/4 teaspoon is what I start with. And then the next day, I still have 2 of those in one day. And then the next day I can go up to a 1/2 teaspoon. Mm-hmm. And I just slowly every day just increase it until I can get a full teaspoon or 2 teaspoons, whatever I'm using in my coffee. But so you have to be careful with it. It goes through.
Go slow. And Juanetta said the same thing, go slow with MCT. Another trick I find is that if I emulsify it into something, like if I have a coffee, I add a little bit of gelatin or a little bit of egg yolk along with the butter or tallow or whatever I'm adding to it, and then emulsify it until it's frothy and like creamy, like a latte. That can sometimes help as well. I don't know why it would. I'm assuming it's slowing gut emptying, something like that. I don't know. And then another thing I wanted to address is in the chat, Juanetta said, I've been a bit skeptical about taking exogenous ketones. I will pause here to say I think it's good to be skeptical. If you're going to go into anything new, be skeptical. Just go in. I'm going to prove myself wrong that that's going to do anything. And if it actually does something, then there you go. But if there are brain benefits, I'm willing to experiment. I'm having a lot of brain fog and procrastination lately. That is primarily when I use it, when I'm having like trouble concentrating, brain fog, stuff like that. Even though I already have, I'm already producing my own ketones, it seems like bumping up the level seems to help, and it tends to help very quickly. But it could be that for some people it doesn't do anything, and it's just, well, maybe there was a separate issue happening or something else going on. I think that's always a possibility, but that's why I like talking about it, because it's another thing that people can try. And if it does work, that's super exciting. If it doesn't work, we've rolled it out and you don't have to think about it.
Well, and I got to think that because the lymphatic system loves to use fat and ketones for fuel, that we're going to have better lymphatic functioning, which means better clearing of waste, better transport of fluid, so maybe an impact on swelling. And when we have good clearance of waste and toxins, maybe we're going to have decreased inflammation and decreased pain. So I think just for the influence that ketones may have on the lymphatic system, again, we're not sure. We're experimenting with. It's been shown in animal studies, but not necessarily humans, that this could have a very favorable impact on symptoms of lipedema, just because it makes your lymphatics work better.
Mm-hmm. Do you happen to have any of that ICG green stuff? Maybe I could like drink some and then take some exogenous ketones and see if there's any like faster lymphatic pumping or something.
Well, so this is interesting. So there is an ingestible IC green, but because you can only see it about 2 centimeters depth, it's only good for using on your arms and your legs. And typically when you ingest it, I mean, that's not the part of the lymphatics that you're going to see. So, but we're experimenting right now. You inject it between your fingers or your toes, and so now you can see the superficial lymphatics of your arms and your legs with
I'd be up for that. I would do that.
But it is kind of painful. But what we're working on
science is fine.
A different ingesting a different contrast with fat, and then using PET scan technology so that we can then visualize the deeper central lymphatics, especially looking at it coming out of the gut, and where does it go to? Does it travel appropriately through the thoracic duct? And so when that comes out, you can bet, Siobhan, you're going to want to do that. And
I would definitely do that.
This will be available at any place where you do where you have a radiologist, because PET scan technology is everywhere.
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely sign up for that. Also in chat, Juanetta said, when glucose is not available, ketones fill in. Depends. In some cases, ketones are actually preferentially used over glucose, even when glucose is available. Really cool example. I'm not going to get too geeky, but there was just a paper talking about a specific type of immune cells that will preferentially use ketones, which is really cool.
Yes. And we have seen in animals, the lymphatic endothelial cells that form the walls of the vessels, of lymphatic vessels, prefer to use ketones. Even in the presence of glucose, they're going to go for the ketones. And I just wanted to thank you, Kim, for being here from New South Wales, Australia. Yay. And I think Juanetta is in Alaska. Thanks for being here. And what does Becky say? Can you recommend a couple of reputable companies that make exogenous ketones?
I want to say something about that, because we can't really promote a particular company, but what we can do is, as you're looking at the ketones, I would suggest that you take a look at ketones that possibly are created by some of the bigger names in the low carb community. I would say maybe Annette Bosworth. Who else is in the low carb community that is starting to really work with ketones? And then if you have a question, send us an email to see if we could go over the ingredients list and those things, to see it, just to have us as a sounding board, so that we can say, I would question this one, or, oh no, that one looks reputable, because it's really difficult. There's so many out there.
Yes.
It's really difficult for us to know what the best one is. And Ghislaine Clark says she uses Dr. Boz's, and I know I know that my kid uses Dr. Boz's and somebody else. I don't know, but it's just that we need to really be careful. We're not recommending everybody go out and get exogenous ketones. We're saying, hey, if you're thinking about this, be skeptical, Juanetta. Be skeptical. Think about it. Give it a try if you want. But yeah, look at the ingredients. Look at everything, and then just drop us an email.
And Chris says it doesn't help everyone, and I think it is important to realize too that it doesn't help everyone, and you need someone to be monitoring you and making sure that you're being safe for yourself.
Yeah, and one thing that I also like to look for is if the company has done efficacy studies on their brand, or done other studies with their brand looking at, does it work? Does it actually elevate ketones in the blood? And then I'll actually read through the paper and see what that found. There are a couple different brands that do that. So that's another little thing that you can look for. And again, like, you can email us and ask questions. We're always happy to help with questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's my email, Leslyn at lipedemaproject.org. Siobhan, what email would you like people to use for you?
It's the exact same, just swap out Leslyn for Siobhan.
And Siobhan is spelled just how it sounds, right?
Well, in Ireland it is.
Yes, it's exactly
how it sounds.
Sound it out. Come on.
Yeah. So I put it up there. Keep the B and the H in the right order. It doesn't work.
Yes. That's right.
But yeah, and of course me, Gail, you can email me anytime. However, I'm not going to have any answers.
Well, maybe not on ketones, but you would have answers on a lot of other stuff.
Oh yeah, okay.
And you can redirect them to the person they should be asking, which is always
that's true. So here's my email, Gail at lipedema-simplified.org. I'm in the Lipedema Simplified arm, and they're in the Lipedema Project arm. So, but yeah, you guys, I'm starting to feel silly now.
I know, and we do need to wrap this up. We've been going for over a half hour, and we always try to control our gift of gab and try to stay under a half hour. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here with us, and we will see you here next Friday, same time, with what's new and coming up with lipedema. Bye, everybody.